I'm Brad Carter. I'm the chief pilot here at the Owlshead Transportation Museum
Where is that located?
in Owlshead, Maine, which is near Rockland on the coast. The airplane was destined for an around-the-world competition, trying to fly around the world and win a prize. It never did that. It got shipped to Halifax. Supposedly the destination was Vancouver, and it was going to be the third plane in a series of Fokker C.IVas used to fly around the world. This one stayed in its crate for quite a while. The around the world attempt failed with an earlier airplane and an earlier leg, and it never quite got anywhere. So then it was rescued from its crate a few years later by Mr. Osborne, apparently, and used for his attempt to go around the world. He started putting together a syndicate to do that, and that just failed, never went anywhere, and was eventually purchased by Bob Work and Eddie, whose last name escapes me.
Brown.
Brown? You think I'd know that one? That would be an easy one to remember. Anyway, Bob and Eddie bought it and used it, hoping to start an airline business. I guess that sort of worked. We have a picture of Clara Bow next to this airplane.
Oh, wow.
And she's talking with Bob Work, and we would actually, when we got the plane flying here.
I have to ask you before, so when did you start flying here?
When did I start flying here?
Yeah.
1998.
Okay.
And
Attempt to do something with it, but it crashed somewhere.
Bob and Eddie, after deciding the airline wasn't a viable concept for them, attempted to use this to fly to Vancouver, and they redid the interior with a fuel tank and put a second cockpit in the back. The pilot sits up top, if you can't tell from this angle, and then took off. The plumbing on the fuel tank wasn't quite right, and they had to land out of gas with a full tank. And they did successfully. And then I guess they knocked the landing gear off somehow in an attempt to get it to another field that was bigger. I'm not sure which. And there it sat for the next 50 years until Kenshin Chet rescued it.
Who rescued it?
Kenshin Chet. He was a trustee here at the museum, and he flew the Fokker DR-1 for many years. And
Is he
like
still
Fokkers,
around?
He is 90-something years old now, and yes, very much alive. Still in Maine, but he doesn't spend much time here anymore.
Okay, tell us about flying it.
Well, flying it, you have a big crew. It takes 6 of us to get it off that little wheel dolly after we get it taxied out or started. Actually, before we start it. We'll roll it out, and then 3 people on each side lifting and another guy pulling, or sometimes we do it with 5. Then you scurry up into the cockpit, which is in itself a painful process. It's not easy. When you're up there, we have another crew of people. We'll take 2 or 3 usually. For the crank, where that hole is in front of the radiator, and the crank cranks, and the engine turns over very slowly, and the guy in the cockpit's cranking a magneto to give us a shower of sparks, and that eventually gets it to life. And then it rumbles a lot. It sounds like a box of rocks. It's just always rumbling, and it's not exhaust. It's gears, and it's quite a noise. But it's a good engine.
It's a Rolls-Royce, right?
Rolls-Royce Eagle 8, which is a 12-cylinder. Predecessor to the Merlin in the Mustang. I mean, this is the grandfather here. It was used as a bomber engine in World War I on the Vickers Vimy. This is the only currently flying Rolls-Royce engine, Eagle 8 engine in the world. This is the only currently flying, this is the only actually left Fokker C.IVa in the world. So there's no others. And at one time there were a couple hundred built, more than that. And they were used by several different militaries.
There we go.
You can't see any of the things that are different in the cockpit, but it does have a retard level for the ignition timing.
Yeah, you can take the camera and want to do that.
All right.
It's actually recording right now. Don't worry, I'll cut out anything.
Well, I bet. So over there, and it's dark, we have the lever for run and start, vice versa actually. So when we try and start it, we push it up here, then we run it, it goes down like that. The stick is a big giant thing, as well as the rudder pedals.
What is the engine anyway?
It's a Rolls-Royce Eagle 8 12-cylinder. I guess the British liked understatement because they call it an 8, but it's a 12-cylinder. So it's got 4 mags.
Did it originally have that in it then?
Yeah, this one did. And again, this was built in Holland after the war.
Right.
So let's see if I got a flashlight in here. All right, so over there is our lever for spark advance. Put it in the start mode to start, and then we put it in the run mode afterwards. We got 2 fuel levers. One's in op, the other one is off right now, and that's to just the one fuel tank. Antique altimeter, modern airspeed, reads 60 miles an hour regardless of what you're doing once it's running. And the RPM, we actually run this somewhere around 12 to 1400 RPM. 1450 is about its max. 2 mag switches, temp and oil pressure. Down here, this is an interesting feature. It's a crank for the radiators.
Run them in and out, huh? Oh yeah, I see.
Yeah, let me see if I can shine light on it while I do it. So the radiators crank in. We almost never do that unless we're starting the airplane. And then we crank them back up.
They didn't believe it fell flat.
Well, no. That's the way they did it anyway. Down here is the mag that I crank when we start it. So I'm sitting up here with my mags on, everything set, and cranking away on this thing, and another guy's down below cranking away on the big crank to make the engine turn over. That's the trim lever. There's 44 turns of trim, so you start off at 22 for takeoff. So you wind it all the way one way and then back 22. Over here is the throttle and mixture. The mixture's on the bottom on this one, which is nice. But I'll show you something kind of interesting. I wish I had 3 hands for the light. Let's see. Yeah, that works. So with the throttle retarded, that's all good. Mixture full forward, like it is right now. But if you go to shut the airplane off with the mixture, watch the top lever. It goes to half throttle. So if you taxi up to park it and don't think it through and go to shut it off with the mixture,
Are you letting people go up in that plane?
he lets me do it all the time. Don't, yeah.
Or he's just a technician or something?
He works here.
Oh. Why?
Do you want to try and get up in this plane?
I don't think so.
The
We can get in here.
we don't anymore. They did in the 20s. So that throttle advances as you're shutting the engine off, and your hand is on the wrong handle. So even if you push it back to full rich, you've got your throttle halfway advanced. And then the rudder pedals have 2 settings. One for shorter and taller people, and it's a bar like the old airplanes had. And that's about all there is in the cockpit. It's roomy, no doubt about that. And you got a compass out here, and the view along the front. There's a radiator tank in the upper wing, and that's what we're looking at with those pipes. And then our fuel gauges and fuel pipe, and then just cabanes and wires.
You have to S-turn it back and forth when you taxi out?
What's that?
You have to S-turn back and forth?
Actually, I take the crew with me. And you do a little bit when you're free taxiing, but most of the time you got the crew that's helping to ensure you go the right way. And to get down is the reverse of getting up.
It looks so comfortable.
Huh? And at one time there were a couple hundred built, more than that. And they were used by several different militaries as a two-seat observation plane. I think you might be able to take some pictures out of that book and
Yeah.
edit them in.
Seems like it'd be hard to see anything out of it though with that lower wing, unless there's a big cutout.
The lower wing's far enough back that you can see forward this way. When we have to taxi to the cross runway, I've got to go between two runway lights. And you got really to get pretty close before you can tell where they are. You don't have good vision that way. The nose does block.
So taking off, how do you take it off?
Well, you run it up, the radiators are out, and you advance the power slowly to full power. The airplane moves slowly, so don't rush to get the tail up because you want to get tail authority first. Then when the tail comes up, it's actually pretty nice. It handles nicely. It comes off the ground very quickly after that and climbs up at a pretty good angle. Unfortunately, the airspeed indicator in this will read around 60 miles an hour while you're climbing out. Then it'll read 60 miles an hour when you're flying level, and then it'll read 60 miles an hour when you're descending. So,
Is the airplane actually changing speeds, or it just?
yes. At different times, I felt that I was actually going 110 miles an hour.
It's at 130 on that thing down below.
It might be, but it's reading 60.
I remember when a few years ago, when you were talking about the DR1. You know, what was the speed it landed at, and you said comes over the fence at 80, and I said, is that miles per hour or kilometers? And maybe
I don't know.
Still don't know.
I haven't looked. This one, like the DR1, has no cross bracing in between. Fokker was pretty good about cleaning up his airplanes. So this one comes into the approach to land is much more like a modern Cessna with no flaps on, because it does come down pretty good. You end up slipping this one quite a bit if you want to get down on a particular spot.
Now, how about is there an adverse yaw problem, and how do you taxi it around on the ground?
I have a guy out here on the wings. It is so heavy that it takes one or two guys to hold right here to turn it around.
Okay.
And they will be pushed and rolled over. There's a lot of power here, but there's a lot of weight too.
And how about the rudder? Do you have to use a lot of rudder with it?
Not particularly. No, it's not bad that way. And everybody else actually likes flying this airplane more than I do. The other people who fly it, they all feel it flies like a Piper Cub. I feel it's very heavy, and if it wants to go away, you've got to be cautious about that when it comes into land. On takeoff, it's good. Flying, pretty good.
And you basically just fly around the pattern. You don't go anywhere with it, really.
We have gone, little excursions to do camera trips and photo,
Oh, really?
photo ops, but not very many.
Oh.
So mostly it's left turns, and it does them fairly well.
Oh, cool. So, it's the star of the, you don't call them air shows, you call them flight demonstrations.
Flight demonstrations, absolutely. So.
I guess that's about enough. What do you think?
Sure.